Thank you so much for joining us for this session on planning for effective digital experiences. My name is Kerry Abercrombie and I am the Curriculum Development Officer for Digital Learning at Falkirk Council. I think that I know most of you, but if I don't, hello, it's lovely to meet you. That is my email on the slide, and you can get in touch with me for absolutely anything curricular based related to digital learning if you need to. So today is all about planning, specifically planning for effective digital experiences. And we will come back to why that word effective has been used. But this is quite a broad topic, as I'm sure many of you will recognise. And we do have with us today a mix of school leaders and classroom teachers. So I thought we would maybe start by saying what the session is going to do, but probably more importantly, what it's not going to do. So what we're not going to be looking at today is giving you any kind of specific template or format for planning. That is not what this is about. This is about looking at things that might be helpful in the planning process, no matter what type of planning it is that you are used to. So we're going to split the session into 3 parts, and we'll begin by thinking about our current planning. Then we're going to put the spotlight on some national documentation and give you early access to a new Falkirk resource that we at the Digital Learning team have created. And then finally, we're going to have a look at some practical applications, which in all honesty could be multiple sessions in and of themselves. But I'm just going to try and show you some very quick things today. So we're going to start by reflecting on our current planning situation. So how is it that we currently plan for digital learning? And this can be quite a complex question, because some teachers are natural big picture thinkers. They start with the end goal and they work backwards. Others are maybe more detail orientated. They focus on the small tactical steps first. Some teachers are highly collaborative and they plan best when they work with colleagues. Others prefer to work on their own. Now, we can't also ignore the systems that we work within. So your school or your department might have specific requirements for lesson plans or shared resources for lesson planning, or even perhaps pacing calendars. And these protocols are there to ensure consistency and alignment, and they are a framework that we do have to work within. So on the next slide, I have put a range of different statements about how one might plan for digital learning. And remember, we're talking specifically about digital learning. All I want you to do is take a little look at the statements and decide which one or ones best describe your current approach. And it might be that none of them do, and that's absolutely fine, in which case you can add your own into the chat. Now, we are going to put our answers in the chat, and it can just be a number, but we're not going to do that immediately. You're going to type your answers into the chat, and then you're going to wait, and I'm going to tell you when to send them. Now, just before I show you the slide, I would like to say to everyone who has just come in that I would like you to pop your name and your school into the chat, please, just so that we can register that you are here against CPD Manager. And if you could also pop the name of anyone else that is with you who might have just joined on one single device to save everybody coming in all together. They have come in all together, coming in individually. Okay, so let's take a look at these planning statements then, remembering that it's specifically about how you plan for digital. So we have 8 to choose from. We have planning that is ad hoc, so you just plan like you always have, or that you already do within the confines of what you do in your school, and you just pop in digital activities when it's convenient, sometimes maybe even just as the opportunity arises. Or are you somebody who is substitution focused? So that is the person who plans as usual and then builds in digital opportunities to replace some analog tasks where it's simple and quick to do so. So for example, researching via Google rather than a book, or typing rather than writing. Or are you an enhancement focused planner? You're somebody who plans to use digital to make tasks a little bit more efficient and engaging. Are you somebody who is strictly a E's and O's benchmarks planner? Are you somebody who goes specifically to those experiences and outcomes in to the technologies benchmarks? And do you plan against the digital literacy or computing science ones? Or are you number five? Are you more tool focused and your planning is really around trying out sort of tools and practices? Or is it to do with that whole school strategy? Is your planning dominantly led by that? Or is your planning led by the students? Is your digital learning planning responsive to their interests and their practices and their emerging skills rather than your own? Or, and this is a classic for secondary school teachers, is your planning exam or assessment driven? Is it all focused around fitting in with coursework, tools, or SQA exam prep? So hopefully you have immediately seen one that you think, oh, that sounds like me. As I say, you might have more than one number in your answer. That is absolutely fine. But if you could pop the number or numbers that you think best reflect you into the chat now, please, and we'll see the variety that we have. What I do want to say is that all of these planning approaches are valid. They all have some form of value. And if you're actively engaging and considering digital when you're planning, then you're already well on your way to providing effective digital experiences for learners. Now, another part that is crucial to our teacher identity that impacts on our planning is our individual beliefs about pedagogy, because these influence how we design a lesson. And I would like to borrow the next task from an excellent book, which I actually have here, which is available through the Learning Resource Service. And it's called From EdTech to PedTech by Dr. Fiona Aubrey-Smith and Alan, I want to say Twinning, it might be Twining. And this practical handbook argues for a shift away from a technology-first approach, which is traditionally the stance of EdTech, and towards a more pedagogy-first approach, a term that they have coined PedTech. So instead of starting with the technology and then trying to fit it into the classroom, this book is all about how educators can align their digital tool use with their core pedagogical beliefs and intentions to try and create a more meaningful and effective learning experience for pupils. So we're going to borrow a little task from this book, and I'm going to show you again a couple of slides. Each will have 4 statements on it. And you just have to figure out which one of the 4 that you most closely align with. And we're going to pop those in the chat. And this time it's letters rather than numbers. And as soon as you see the one that's you can just put it straight into the chat. Okay, so here we go. The first one is about the purpose of education. What do you believe from these 4 statements the purpose of education is? Do you think that it is something that teaches learners habits and rules and routines and knowledge that society has decided is important for everyone to live and work well together? Or are you more of a B candidate who helps learners build clear ways of understanding the world and the methods for using that understanding in different situations? Or do you align more closely with C, which is the belief that the purpose of education is to support learners in developing structured ways of understanding the world and strategies for applying this knowledge in different contexts? And importantly, that learners should also come to understand how knowledge is shaped by social and cultural factors? Or are you a D, somebody who believes that the purpose of education is to support learners in becoming competent and valued social practices within a range of different communities, and each community has its own shared objectives and valued ways of working? So in the chat, please, are you an A, a B, a C, or a D when it comes to the purpose of education? What do you think? Look at the next one then. Learners are. So which statement do you agree most with? Learners are blank slates who learn through imitation or acquisition. Learners actively build their own understanding. Learners are actively part of helping to create and shape their own knowledge. Or learners are active participants in learning who have different skills and identities depending on the communities that they are part of. What do we think for that one? Teachers. Teachers are the holders of knowledge. Teachers are facilitators who create the conditions needed for learning. Teachers are knowledgeable about different subject domains and how to direct learning, or teachers are knowledgeable in socially valued ways of working. Which of these statements do you agree with the most? Next one then, learning potential is. So learning potential is determined by a learner's innate abilities, or is learning potential limited by a learner's age or stage of development? Or is learning potential not limited by age or stage, but by the sophistication of the learner's existing models and experiences that they have had? Or learning potential is dependent on the experiences they have had within the communities that they belong to? What do you think? Next one then, the role of the teacher is to what? The role of the teacher is to instruct, to guide learning, to scaffold learning, or to orchestrate support available for learners. So A, B, C, or D. Good stuff. Right, so you have answered 5 questions with a letter, and I just want you to think back now to what you were saying. So were you nobody was mostly A, nobody was A, but were you mostly B, mostly C, or mostly D? And hopefully you have that in your mind now and you know which letter you answered the most frequently. Because these statements all align to a teaching stance and the beliefs that fall behind it. So if you were mostly A, you are more likely to have a traditional teaching stance. If you are B, you are probably an individual constructivist. If you are a C, you are probably a social constructivist. And if you're a D, you probably hold socio-cultural beliefs about learning and pedagogy and how knowledge is created. And here is really the key takeaway, is that it is our beliefs about pedagogy and learning and knowledge that shape how we plan, including how we plan for digital learning. So if you think about it, if you lean traditional, your lessons are probably going to be more focused on individual tasks, retrieval practice, tools that help with memorization, lots of rote learning. But next door, a teacher who takes a social constructivist approach is going to be running quite a collaborative classroom with lots of creative activities where students are really getting that chance to share ideas and express themselves and learn together. Those classrooms are completely different. Those teachers act completely differently. The learning is completely different, and therefore it stands to reason that the planning would be completely different. Now, while that does make it very difficult to come up with a one-size-fits-all for planning, what we do have and what we do share as teachers are the common building blocks of good teaching, the parts of the lesson cycle that we know work, the tools, the approaches that we go to construct a lesson, that strong pedagogy that anybody can draw on, no matter which of the stances that they come from. And we're going to come back to those in a bit in section 3 and explore how maybe some of these building blocks can support effective digital experiences. But for just now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the next section to look at the documentation, and I am going to try my hardest to make this as not boring as possible. But it's crucially important that we do have an understanding of and a knowledge about where to get information about why we are providing digital learning experiences, what those might look like, what constitutes high quality or effective experiences, and how that all fits in with our curriculum for excellence here in Scotland. Now, this foundational basis of national policy very much underpins and helps to drive local initiatives and approaches to digital learning. And Stuart, Mary Jane and I and the digital team would all hope that as we go through this little section that you will see how what we do here in Falkirk does relate quite strongly to the national documentation. So sometimes it can feel like in a school we're just doing our own thing and that our children's digital experiences are based on like our knowledge or our enthusiasm for digital. And what this will be is if you are somebody who feels like that, this will be a great opportunity for you to look at the bigger picture and hopefully get a little bit of confidence that, do you know what, yeah, I am doing things right. And also get a chance to see where there are improvements or gains that might be made and what the next steps might be for you on your digital learning journey. And if you are somebody who is here as a school leader, what the next steps might be for your colleagues and for your establishments. So, as many of you know, or maybe don't know, there are several national guidance and support documents available from Education Scotland that are designed to help teachers in schools with the delivery of digital learning, teaching and assessment. For Falkirk, what we have done is we've created this new document on the right here called Planning for Digital Learning. And what that does is that brings together all of these documents, it signposts out to them, but most importantly, it takes all of the most relevant information from each set of documents and presents it in a way that is hopefully a little bit more accessible and useful for you to see the key information from all of the documents in one place. So I am going to pop a little link in the chat, and I also have a QR code here for you that is going to allow you to see this document. Give me a second while I'll sort out the link. There we go. So the link is in the chat if you're not on a device that can scan. So you are literally the first teachers in Falkirk to see this. And those who have been on other sessions with us will know that normally the links that we would provide you with would go through a short bit.ly link, or it might go via a dedicated article or page on the Connected Falkirk website. And this doesn't do that. This goes straight to a version of the document that exists. And that's because this is still currently being worked on. So that's why we don't have any of that other stuff in place just yet, but it is coming. And this will have its place alongside all of our other stuff on the DigiLearn Falk site and with a short link, etc., etc. But we want it to be finished completely before we do that. So you can feel free to share this with others. It's not under embargo, it's not a secret, but your access is with the caveat that there is more to this coming. And I'll tell you a little bit about what is in the works. But for now, this is access to part 1, which is all about the documentation. So before we go in and have a little look at the documents, I just want to make a really, really clear distinction between two terms that are often conflated with one another. And I imagine, given the names on the list today, that I am preaching to the choir, but I just want to be really clear that digital learning and digital literacy or skills are two different things. And I know that most of you already know this, but it's just so that everybody is on the same page. So digital learning refers to the process of using digital tools, platforms, or resources to support or enhance learning, teaching, and assessment. Whereas digital literacy or digital skills are the abilities and competencies needed to use digital devices, apps, and platforms effectively and safely. For us, the focus is on digital learning, how technology can enrich teaching, learning, and assessment, how we can use it in our pedagogy and put it in the hands of our learners. Now, of course, digital skills are important and they are a very important part of digital learning, but the key idea is that most of these skills are best developed through engaging in digital learning itself. And there is some debate about this in some circles, and I'm sure that you'll all be familiar with this. Some people do believe that all kinds of skills, not just digital skills, but all kinds of skills need to be developed first in isolation before you can incorporate them. And that's true for digital. So some people think that digital skills have to be learned on their own before you can incorporate them into digital learning. This is becoming a less common stance, but there are some people who still believe that domain-specific skills need to be acquired first. I would refer you back to the activity that we did about pedagogical beliefs. We're not going to change those people's minds, but I would encourage you to think about where that belief comes from. Is it because that is actually what we believe? Or is it, with the case of digital, because that is what we were used to doing back in the day? So when the exposure and access to digital tools, devices, computers, iPads, Chromebooks, whatever, when that was only for an hour a week, when we used to take our classes to the IT suite so they could touch a keyboard, is that a hangover from that time? A time for when many children, that might have been the only time that they got to engage with a digital device, either at school or at home. And if we had limited face-to-face time with a digital device, then absolutely prioritizing skills makes sense. But that's not the position that we're in now. We are very fortunate to be in a much better position in terms of access to digital devices. Now, for better or worse, when you think about the spirit of Curriculum for Excellence, the whole point is that it's supposed to be a holistic approach. And in fact, at the start of every single set of benchmarks, there is the following statement, and I quote, "Skills development is integrated into the benchmarks to support greater shared understanding." So as a digital learning team, we do believe that it is important for us to make that really clear distinction between digital learning and digital literacy or skills. Digital learning includes digital literacy and skills, but it is not only digital literacy and skills. In this document then that we've made for you, there are 5 documents that are covered. And I'm just going to very quickly give you a tour of the new document so that you can see what it is that we have done. So I'm going to come out of my Keynote and I am going to go into my files where I have this document open. Right, so this is what the document looks like if you've not already taken a little peek at it. And it starts with digital literacy and digital skills, which obviously we know is not the same as digital learning. Now, if you haven't seen this first document before, which is called the Learner Digital Skills Toolkit, I am absolutely not surprised because it is relatively new. And what the document does is that it sets out the core skills and knowledge that learners need to be digitally competent and progress towards full digital literacy. So what I have done for you here is all we've done is taken the key points that this document mentions, and as you can see, it splits it into foundational skills and developing skills and knowledge. And I've just presented them in a little bit of a clearer way so that you can see them at a glance next to each other, condensing it down into 3 pages rather than 18 pages. So it's really easy to see all the foundational skills together on one page, including their "I know that" and "I am able to" statements, and then all of the developing ones just over 2 pages. So it's just 3 pages instead of all 18. Next up then we have the Curriculum for Excellence benchmarks and experiences and outcomes, again sticking with digital literacy. You will be well familiar with Curriculum for Excellence and the big hefty documents and the multiple pages and the tables that you can never copy and paste from properly. They can be quite cumbersome to work with sometimes. So what we've done here for you is we've just taken each organizer one by one and made a table that shows you the experiences and outcomes and their benchmarks from early all the way to 4th level, just for that specific organizer, but all on one page so that it's easier perhaps to see the progression. And I don't think I need to say very much more about that. I think that's pretty clear. The next one is actually probably one of my favourite documents, and it's one that is fairly new and actually not a lot of people tend to know about it. I think it's really, really useful. It's called What Digital Learning Might Look Like. And fair warning, it does only go up to second level. I don't know why. They have never released another one that has third and fourth level. It just seemed to end at second level. But what this does is that it gives you all of those experiences and outcomes, but then it gives illustrative examples of exactly what they think that might look like in a classroom. And you'll maybe see the connection between what I was saying about that holistic approach, because many of their examples, their illustrative examples, could be recontextualized within other curricular areas. So, for example, if I go to second level, and I look at this first one, which is TCH 2-01A, the experience and outcome reads, I can extend and enhance my knowledge of digital technologies to collect, analyse ideas, relevant information, and organise these in an appropriate way. What does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? Well, what this document does is this document tells you what that's kind of supposed to look like, or what that might look like. It's not an exhaustive list, but we can see this very first one here. It gives us a literacy and English context. And it says that one of the things that we might see as evidence of this benchmark is children and young people creating a range of texts that are increasingly collaborative and multimodal. So, for example, writing and recording a song with metaphors and similes, creating a podcast for World Book Day, publishing a book about Rabbie Burns for Scots Language Week using Book Creator, etc., etc., etc. And I think for me, the point is that this could so easily then be recontextualized to, I mean, they're talking about Robert Burns and they're talking about World Book Day, but this could easily be the Titanic, volcanoes, the Romans, the rainforest, democracy, recycling, inventors, historic figures, you know, the list goes on and on. So these little illustrative examples are quite easy to recontextualize to suit whatever it is that you happen to be teaching at the time. And I do have to say that particularly for early level, this document is a revelation to lots of people, because it's really good to have those quite broad benchmark statements just really clearly exemplified. Now, the full document does cover the computing science experiences and outcomes from technologies as well. We haven't included those in this document, but if that's something that you do think would be valuable to be added, we can do that. You can just let us know, but we've kept it to the digital literacy ones for now. Now, the last document that is in here is another one that not a lot of people necessarily know about. It's relatively new, and this is the features of highly effective digital learning, teaching and assessment in schools, a very long title. It's a couple of years old now, but I do think it is really good. And this one in particular is useful for leaders, but it is also useful for teachers who can get a lot out of it when reflecting on their own practices. So what highly effective features of digital learning, teaching and assessment in schools does is it outlines what Education Scotland believe are the features of high quality, effective digital learning experiences for all children and young people. And that is why this session has the term effective in the title, because we are all engaging in digital learning in some form, but this is what Education Scotland are saying is effective features or experiences. Now, the document itself is split into distinct sections, and only one of those sections is planning. But what we've done in this document is we've actually pulled all of the illustrative examples that include things that we think you probably should be thinking about when planning, even though they're not in the planning section. But we have to plan to be able to make those things happen for assessment and for teaching. They're not just going to happen on their own. So what we've done here for you is we've taken the ones, and it is just a sample of some, but the ones that we think that most of our schools and most of our teachers are either already doing, or those that are easy enough for for them to get to, given the environment that Connected Falkirk creates in our schools. Now, of course, we do need to take into account that primaries aren't entirely one-to-one, and some of these things are going to be a lot easier to do with primary 6 and primary 7 than they are with our children who are in shared environments, but certainly that is a good place to start. And if I just take you to this single page that I've pulled all of these together, hopefully when you have some time to read across this, you'll see that you're already doing some of these things. But what I feel like this document is really great for is for pulling the focus on what we should be aiming for with our digital learning. It's about the cultures and the practices that we should be trying to develop. And these are quite clearly built here as highly effective. And interestingly, if you look across the HMIE reports that have come out recently from all across Scotland, this is quite closely aligned with the kinds of things that they seem to be focused on when it comes to HMIE and looking at digital learning. And you'll notice that there are less mentions of the very specific types of digital tools or equipment, such as, your Bbots and your Spheros and your microbits and all your shiny fancy stuff. And it also doesn't mention iPads or Chromebooks or what particular device, but what it does do is it very much focuses on the pedagogy, the learning, the teaching, and the assessment. And I think that is really, really useful. And that takes us quite nicely then into our next section, which does focus a little bit on the pedagogy and the practical application. But once again, I'm just going to pause here for a moment and see if anybody has any questions or comments on what they have just seen. And I would love to get just like a straw poll reaction of like, do you think this looks good? Do you think this is going to be helpful? What are your immediate sort of thoughts about this document that we've pulled together for you? So we'll move on then to speak about practical application. And this is where we sort of zoom right into classroom practice. And I guess in the spirit of highly effective features and what digital learning might look like, I just want to touch on some of the approaches and ideas that are based around many familiar pedagogical strategies that are already used in classrooms all over Falkirk and beyond. So the idea for this practical application is that anybody in any school should see something on here that is familiar to them, and they should be able to pick that up and get an idea of how they can use digital to enhance that particular building block of a lesson. So obviously it's huge. We can't cover absolutely everything, but we can take a moment to look into some bits and pieces that are probably very, very easy to implement. And again, we're not talking about specifically digital projects. We're not talking about robots or microbits or coding or any of that stuff or any of the specific digital skills, digital literacy and isolation stuff. We're talking about how digital can be woven into and enhance everyday learning and teaching experiences. So I told you at the start that the document that we've just looked at is only part one. And the plan for part two is that it's going to be entirely focused on practical application. So I'm going to show you the list of what we currently have planned to focus on in part two. And we're going to take a look at two or three in a little bit more detail. And there is going to be a chance to make some suggestions at the end if you feel that there's anything missing from here that would be valuable. Now, what I will say is that it's not intended to be an exhaustive list of the building blocks of a lesson or pedagogies or approaches. It's intended to be a sort of quick guide, informational piece, pick up and use, identify something that you already do, and use this resource to support you in figuring out how you can do that digitally. So remember, nobody is saying that everything has to be done digitally. And I want to be really clear about that. Even as the digital learning team, we do not believe that everything should be done digitally. There absolutely has to be a balance. But the hope is that this will allow teachers to choose which parts of their lessons or which blocks of their lessons are going to be a focus for digital, and it helps to support them to quickly and efficiently embed digital into their lesson cycle. So you can see here we've got stuff that hopefully, well, not hopefully, I know is familiar to all of you. The only one that's on here really that is solely digital is the virtual learning environments. But once we get past that, we've got things like jotters, starters and plenaries, modelling, scaffolds, delivering content, making artifacts, how we collaborate, formative assessment, feedback. Lots and lots and lots of things that will hopefully look very familiar to you. And I would like to think that you're looking at that going, do you know what, Kerry, actually, this is how to speak to my teachers about digital, because this is what this is teachers' bread and butter. This is what they do every day. So that's the idea behind it. As I say, you'll get a chance to maybe add some more in towards the end. But I'm just going to pick up on a couple of these and show you what kind of thing we're speaking about when we say how do we digitally enhance that. So I'll start with modelling as one of our sort of main building blocks. Now, modelling has been a huge part of learning and teaching for absolutely forever. So from whiteboards, or before then blackboards, visualizers, which are still quite popular today, and even back to the days of the overhead projector on the right. I won't ask who does and doesn't remember that getting wheeled into their classroom. But back in the day when the teacher used to put the acetate over the top and use their stinky different coloured pens, because they were always like really chemically smelling, right over the top of the acetate, to demonstrate processes to learners. That's always been around. That is an absolute staple of our profession. And in classrooms where we have a teacher iPad or even a pupil iPad and an Apple TV with the ability to project our screen, we can take this very, very familiar approach and get some real enhancements from doing it digitally. And remember, it's not about doing it digitally for the sake of doing it digitally. It's about doing it digitally because it actually enhances or improves the process. So I'm going to start with blank canvas modeling. So there's lots of different types of modeling. We're going to speak about blank canvas modeling first. So this is where the teacher, as you know, wants to start with a blank page and demonstrate a process from the very start. And to do this, all I'm looking for essentially is a digital whiteboard. And there's lots and lots of options for this. But what we don't need is a specific education whiteboard app. There can be a lot of what we call app culture in schools. One of my least favourite phrases is, well, but we're going to need an app for that, because that's a technology first mindset. That's not putting the pedagogy and the learning and what we actually need and want to achieve first. And actually, a lot of the time, when we're talking about pedagogy, we don't need a specific app. What we need is a digital version of the tools that we are already using. So in this case, for blank canvas modelling, I need a board of some sort and a pen. Now, on my connected Falkirk iPad right now, without having to download anything, I've got two apps that are going to give me exactly what I want and need. Those are Notes, which comes as standard on all iPads and has done for a very long time. It's also on your phone. And everybody running iOS 18 or above will also have the app on the right, which is called Freeform. If you don't see Freeform, you probably need to update your iPad software. That's how it appears. You don't download it, it just appears once you've upgraded to iOS 18. Now let's have a look at how quickly and easily I can begin some blank canvas modelling then. So I am going to go into Notes. And in Notes, I am going to tap in the top right-hand corner the little square with the pencil to make a new note. And then In the top right hand corner again, I'm going to tap this time on the pencil that is within a circle. And I'm just going to press this expand arrow just close to the grey pane here on the left to make that a full size board. And that's me ready to go. I can now blank canvas model. Now, I am going to use a stylus rather than my finger just to have that control and clarity. I personally have an Apple Pencil that was bought to me as a Christmas gift. I also have a Scriva, which does the exact same thing at a fraction of the price, about 35 quid. And I also have loads and loads of those tiny little rubber tipped styluses, which you can buy from Amazon for like £3.99 for 10. And I actually used to have a class set of those, and that was one of the best things that I ever bought for my classroom. But it does help to have a stylus when you are going to be doing blank canvas modelling or any other kind of modelling, to be honest. So I'm going to ask if you've got an iPad just now in front of you, if you could also open notes. And today I'm just going to model one of my favourite doodle puzzles. So I'm going to draw a little house, and it's going to be made up of 8 lines. So it's going to be a line here, a line here, a line here, a line here, and here, and here, and a cross in the middle. But your challenge is going to be, can you draw this house using one continuous line without lifting your pen or your finger and without doubling back on yourself? I want you to give that a little go just now if you've got your notes app open. If you've not got your notes app, you can just try this with a pen and pencil actually. Right, so people are starting to say that they are done and they have figured it out. I'm just going to change to a wee yellow pencil here, and let's see how we do that. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and my first line is going to be straight up the way. Does anybody have any suggestions for which direction I should go in next? I'm going to go right. Then I'm going to go diagonal and up. Then I'm going to go the only way that I can, which is down here. From here, I can only go one way. I've got to go down through the middle. And then I'm going to go up, back through the middle, and then join it up there. So I have gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I went 6, 7, and finally 8. So that is just a silly wee example, but think about how quickly I was able to get into a blank canvas and just start showing a process. Super quick, super easy. And now I also have a record on my iPad of exactly what it was that I did with my class. So unlike physical board, I don't have to wipe this away when I'm finished. I can keep it for as long as I need. Now, I also mentioned freeform, which is very similar, but the benefit of freeform is that it's actually like a big, massive canvas. So if I go into freeform, you'll see that the buttons are all similar because it's a native iOS app. I'm going to press on the little rectangle with the pencil in it. So I'm in my board. Again, I'm just going to find that pencil with the circle around it, and that's going to bring up my drawing tools, and just exactly like I could in notes, I can draw whatever it is that I need to draw. I can write whatever it is that I need to write. But what you'll see is if I pinch and zoom, I have a huge amount of space to be able to draw and write and do processes. So if the Notes app is a bit too confined for you, if you're doing a lot of blank canvas modelling, or you're going with the children's suggestions, and you know how it can sometimes get on your whiteboard where you're cramming it into little corners when they're giving you suggestions or giving you ideas. Freeform is probably better for your blank canvas modeling if you're going to be doing something like that, because you do have the benefit of lots and lots of space. So that is blank canvas modeling. And just before we move on, I know we're not talking about all response systems here, but I also just want to point out that if you do work in a one-to-one environment, or even in a shared environment and children are working in groups, you now also have an instant show me board where the children can draw their answer, write their answer, and then turn it around and show you their iPad screen. Another well-loved, well-used assessment for learning formative assessment technique. Okay, so obviously that is starting with a blank canvas, but we might not always be starting with a blank canvas. We might want to do the same thing for worked examples or completion modelling. So in this case, where we would start with some form of content and then use modelling to scaffold. So in this example on the screen, this is an SQA Nat 5 English paper just from last year actually, which is all about Taylor Swift. And you can see that what's happening is the way to answer is being modelled for the learner on the page. It's going through how that particular answer should be structured. So things like worksheets, the use of diagrams, labelling, maths problems, there's all sorts of scenarios in which we use worked examples or completion modelling, and these can be done digitally. Now, the way I would have done this in the past is I would have projected the worksheet onto my whiteboard and then I would have written over the top with my lovely whiteboard pen. And then the second I needed to move on, I would either have to wipe it off the board or I would have to pull the board down to a fresh surface before I could continue. And that made doing anything of any length really difficult. But by doing it this way on my iPad with my screen projected via Apple TV, I can do this for as long as I need across as much of the document as I need to. It makes it really quick, really easy, and really, really efficient. Another type of modelling, of course, involves the classic visualizer that we all love. It's something that's still really popular, but it's something that is rarely thought of when we think about an obvious use of our iPad for modelling. So using our camera as a visualizer. So as soon as you turn your camera on and point it at something, it's then going to be projected to the whole class through your Apple TV. So when we're trying to demonstrate physical processes, so science experiments, chopping skills in home economics, PE, bits and pieces, drama, techie, art, all of those times where you would have the whole class come and sit around you so that they could see what you're doing with your hands, and then there's kids at the back that can't see, and then there's a big disruption because everybody's had to get up and jostle for a place. You know, you've lost all that time getting them in and out of their seats. This is a really easy and quick way to make sure that everybody can see what you're doing without having to break the flow of the lesson. And importantly, when we brought them all around us, they had to remember what they had seen, then go back to their seats and then do it themselves. So that's not actually, it is modelling, but you're not modelling in real time. They have a duty to remember that. Whereas here, you can do the process as they also do it. You can repeat anything that anybody has missed. It's just a really, really quick and easy way to turn your iPad into a visualizer. I don't think I need to go on about that very much more. The problem here really is that sometimes it's hard to get your iPad set up in the right sort of way to be able to do things. You often have to work around the front of it with your iPad sort of in between you and your hands. So it can take a bit of practice, but once you've got it sorted, it's an absolute game changer. Finally then, on modelling, just a reminder that we can screen record very, very easily on our iPads. And we can screen record in conjunction with any of the other 3 types of modelling that we've just seen. So we can screen record if we are doing something that's a visualizer, we can screen record worked examples, and we can screen record blank canvas modelling. And what Screen Record does is it captures a permanent record of that modelling, which we can then share with our class via Google Classroom, Teams, or other links. Now, to record your screen, all you have to do is put your finger where the little battery is in the top right-hand corner and pull in a straight line down. And that's going to open up your control center. And in your control center, you will have the record button. Now, my record button is currently red because actually I am involved in a little bit of modeling and screen recording as we speak, because I'm doing exactly what I am telling you about, except I'm not standing at the front of the classroom, I'm beaming into you via a WebEx meeting, but the principle is basically the same. Now, if you don't have that little record button, what you do is tap and hold on your control center, and you'll see that you get the option to add or take away the different controls. And if you tap on add control, you should be able to find your screen record button in there. And when you tap on it, it's going to add to your control center. If you have any questions about Control Centre, do please contact Mary Jane, because Mary Jane Wilcox is an absolute Control Centre fan. It's one of her favourite functions on the iPad, and she's got it all set up for like accessibility, quick clicks and stuff like that. So do get in touch with Mary Jane if you've got any questions about Control Centre. But that's where we would access our screen record button. And you do actually have the option when you press and hold screen record, which I'm not going to do just now because it'll stop recording. You can choose whether to have your microphone turned on or turned off, which is really useful because we can just capture our screen, but we can also capture our screen and our voice. Now, if we think about planning for digital learning, it would be easy to take what I've said and do that and then say, Kerry said that me using my iPad with my Apple TV is digital learning. But I do want to stress that you have to remember the children in all of this. If the children are not getting a chance to use digital tools, then the children are not getting a chance to engage with digital learning. They are not getting to practice their digital literacy skills. So do consider the children when you come to this. It's easy for modelling to end up being all about the teacher. But just think about, what is it that you're asking the children to do? Are you always the one holding the iPad and they're always having to do it on paper, or are you creating opportunities where you're all working together digitally? That's not to say that every time you use your iPad to model, the children should also be using their iPads. That issue of balance comes up again. But I would say that it shouldn't always be just you on your iPad modelling. Do ensure that the children have the chance to practice those all-important skills. Next then, we've kind of touched on formative assessment when we talked very briefly about the whiteboards as an all-response system. And we do have plans to include multiple different things in the formative assessment section of the document when it comes. And one of those things is going to be quizzing. Now, as I'm sure you're all aware, most quizzing is retrieval practice, but not all retrieval practice is quizzing. It is just one way that you can engage in retrieval practice. Now, the quality of a quiz as a form of retrieval practice is very much based on a number of things, and that includes the focus on recall. So the quiz has to actively bring information to mind from memory. It can't just be about reading and rereading it. The quiz has to have feedback built in, so the learners have to receive some kind of feedback on their answer to be able to identify correct or incorrect answers and misconceptions so that they don't store that wrong information in their long-term memory. And quizzing doesn't have to be low stakes, it can be high stakes quizzing, but what low stakes quizzing does is it encourages risk taking and making mistakes as an opportunity for learning. And of course, any quizzing to be retrieval practice has to reinforce learning by engaging the process of mental rehearsal so that students can strengthen memory connections and improve their ability to recall information. So if your quiz is just there for the sake of filling time or as a novelty, then it's probably not actually performing as retrieval practice or formative assessment. What I'm saying is some quizzes are retrieval practice, but not all retrieval practice is quizzing. Some quizzes are retrieval practice. So I am a fan of digital quizzing for many reasons, and there are lots of different services that allow us to do this for free with our classes. Just some of them are listed here on the board. Some will be familiar to you, others may not. Now, the ones on the right, Curipod and Wayground, which used to be called Quizzes, they actually do more than just quizzing. I wouldn't say that they are quizzing platforms in and of themselves. I would say that they are more content delivery platforms that have interactive elements and quizzing built in. And if you want to know more about either of those, both of those services are featured heavily in our next AI and education session, which is all around engagement and interaction. And that's happening on the 22nd of November. So do keep an eye out for that. Now, the ones on the left, I find a little bit more limited, and I really don't want to upset anyone because I know that these are big fan favourites. So I'm not saying they're not valuable. I'm just saying I find them a little bit more limited. So on a free account with Kahoot, Gymkit and Bluekit, you can only have either multiple choice questions or true or false questions on some of them. And that is what makes them limited. Now, the other elements that all the ones on the left share is that they highly involve gamification of learning, which is absolutely fine. I love a bit of gamification of learning. It can be super, super useful. But some of these do reward children who can read the fastest. And what we don't always necessarily consider is how that might advantage some and disadvantage others, especially when we're putting them in a competitive gamified environment where there's going to be a leaderboard at the end. If you can't read the question as fast as the other people sitting around you, then you're destined to never be at the top of that leaderboard. And a lot of these tools will reward children not just for the correct answer, but for how quickly they can answer. So just be mindful of that. Now, I've just said all that stuff and I'm now going to make you play a Bluekit. So just bear that in mind. I want you to think about how you feel when we're playing this game of Bluekit, right? So Bluekit is one of the ones that you've maybe used before, but I think it's maybe not as popular as Kahoot, but I love it. And the reason that I love Bluekit is because I really like the game modes that they have within their offer, because many of the game types will mix recall with strategy, which levels the playing field a little bit because it's not all about memory, it's not all about reading the fastest. And it does also make them super fun. The other thing that I like about the game modes in Bluekit is that they will continue to reuse questions from the set. So there is a chance for children to revisit the questions that they have got wrong previously. So we are going to play a game of Bluekit in probably my second favourite mode, which is cafe mode. My favourite is Crypto Hack. Comments in the chat if you've ever done Crypto Hack with your class. That is quite dramatic. So I wouldn't do that with a sensitive class or a highly competitive class because Crypto Hack can get pretty drama. But cafe mode is lovely. So what cafe mode is going to do is you're going to answer questions in order to buy some food items to give to your customers. And those customers will be looking for specific kinds of food items. So you can either spend your time answering questions to get the toast and the yogurt and all that, or you can spend your time giving the toast and the yogurt to the customers to make money. Now, we will have an individual scoreboard, but we're also going to have a collective scoreboard of how much money we have made as a class, a collective cash pot. Now, I'm not going to give you a heap of instructions because you are all grown-ups, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to figure this out by yourselves. If you were children, obviously I would give you a bit of a demo, but we're just going to jump right in. So we're going to be doing some first grade maths today. So hopefully everybody's cool with counting from 1 to 50. I'm just going to host the game and go down to cafe, tap on host. I'm just going to change the time. We're not going to play for 7 minutes. We're not going to play for 30. We're going to play for 3. I am going to have random names for you, and I'm going to host that now. And so you can either use the QR code in the top left-hand corner, or you can go to play.blookit.com and type in the number there, 400401. So we're just going to join the Blookit and we're going to get ready for cafe mode. And that's us. And here are our final standings. So we have Boom Mask in 3rd place. Congratulations to you. Unicorn Song in 2nd place with £4,000. And Sprite Friend absolutely pulling in a shift at the cafe for us with over $11,000 made. So kind of like Kahoot, you can see, yeah, fine. And we can see if we go to view report that we're not actually really interested in that top level. What we're interested in is the analytics of what's actually happened here. So you can see we had 19 players, we had 5 incorrect answers. We can see the leaderboard, but we can also see how many questions people got right and how many questions people got wrong. So that is going to be really useful for me if I want to just check the individual performance of the children and maybe see where I need to put in some extra scaffolds or extra support, who needs to go back and practice their sequencing a little bit more, or have we consolidated that as a group and actually we're fine to move on. Now, it was fun. It was interactive and it was more like a game, obviously, than a paper quiz. If I'd given a paper quiz about sequencing or played a sequencing game in class, then I would either have to mark that or I would have to be left to hope that the children found it useful. But because I've done this digitally, I can now also get the benefit of the analytics, as you can see here. So quizzing is sometimes seen as a novelty. I do understand that, especially in the early days of Kahoot, where you would walk past every single classroom and it would be that soundtrack that you synonymously associate with Kahoot. But actually, it really does have some enhancements. We wouldn't be able to get this level of information analytics-wise from a game in class. But if we have a digital game, then we do, as the teacher, get some useful information from that. Now, Lindsay's saying in the chat, and she's quite right, she didn't remember her name. So if it gives you random names, obviously that's maybe slightly less useful because you won't know who the child is. If you are getting children to use their real names, that's absolutely fine, but first names only, please. And if you have 2 Callums, just the first initial of their surname is the safest way to play Blookit, Kahoot, any of those kinds of things. Okay, so we're coming towards the end now. So obviously we're going to talk about plenaries. Now, much of what I'm about to say is also going to apply to starters as well. I don't know about you, but the absolute key physical item that I loved to use for a plenary was a Post-it note. I was a huge fan of the exit ticket, and in secondary school, the easiest way for me to get them to give me an exit ticket was to stick it on the door on their way out. It was practical, it made sense, it was easy to implement. But what it did leave me with was a drawer absolutely rammed with stacks of used Post-its, because I would read the exit tickets at the end, I would take in the information, I would make my list of the things that I had to do from that information, and then I would meticulously keep them all in a drawer just in case I needed to go back and look at them again. Now, it is very hard for me to give up Post-its. I am a stationary gal, and it has been something that I've had to wean myself off. But I can say that I'm fully converted to the digital exit ticket. And that's because it doesn't cost me a fortune in stationery, and it also doesn't cost me space in my classroom. So like with quizzing, there's many tools and services that we can use to do starters and plenaries. But what I'm usually looking for, if I think again about what does the pedagogy actually require, what I am looking for is like a place for learners to access quickly where they can make a contribution. And I need to be able to go to that space and see what it is that they have said. Now, one of my favourite tools for this, if it doesn't matter if everybody can see the exit ticket, is Padlet. Now, I know that there's beef about Padlet because you can only have 3 free Padlets on a free account at any time. But the final document that we're going to make about this will cover some strategies and tips for how you can still use Padlet with a free account without having to upgrade to more Padlets. But for now, what I'm going to do is I am going to give you a QR code. So I can see some folks are still typing. You can absolutely continue to fill that in, folks. But all that remains to say is thank you very much for coming tonight. I hope the session has been useful. I do understand that some of you might have come thinking you were going to be given some sort of format or template for planning, and that hasn't been what it's been about, but hopefully that's made you think about planning and planning for digital, and how actually it's not about planning for digital specifically, it's just about planning for high quality learning and teaching, and then finding where we can put those digital enhancements into what we're already doing. So I hope you're looking forward to getting your hands on that full version of that document. Mary Jane and I will be working away on that. And as soon as it's ready, I will make sure that I make contact with everybody who has attended the session today to send you the full link to the full document. But all that remains to say is, yeah, thank you so much, and have a safe journey home from wherever you're travelling from to your house. Enjoy the rest of your evening.